Hello, and welcome to the Family Office Network's webinar series. Today's event is hosted by tZERO, a leader in financial innovation and liquidity for private companies and assets, and will explore private market liquidity through digital securities. I'd like to turn it over to Solomon Tesfaye, VP of Business Development and Capital Markets at tZERO.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you all for joining. I'm Solomon Tesfaye. I'm the Vice President of Business Development and Capital Markets here at tZERO. I lead the strategic partnerships and identifying high-quality assets globally that are great candidates to trade on the tZERO private secondary market platform. My background prior to tZERO is in investment banking at Citigroup, where I focus on diversified industrials, and more specifically industrial technology. Before I worked at Citigroup, I was working in venture capital, focused on seed stage investing within technology and healthcare, and a variety of operational roles in technology and healthcare prior to that. After the introductions, I'll be providing an overview of tZERO's capabilities. I'll hand it off to Ashu to introduce himself.
Thanks, Solomon. I'm Ashu Vutz. I'm Director of Business Development and Capital Markets here at tZERO. I've been with the firm for a little under 2 years. My background's similar to Solomon's in traditional investment banking. I was on the equity capital markets desk covering the tech sector at Barclays, specifically focused on IPOs and follow-ons for technology companies. Prior to that, I held roles at Goldman Sachs and Bank of America. Today, after Solomon, I'll be going through the process of digitizing a security and what it's like to go through the process with tZERO and onboarding onto our platform. I'm excited about the opportunity today. I'll hand it over to Ryan.
Thanks, Ashu. Hello, my name is Ryan Zaga. I'm an Associate Director of Business Development and Capital Markets at tZERO, and I'm primarily focused on our real estate issuances. Prior to joining tZERO, I was a Director of Acquisitions at Paramount Group, a publicly traded REIT focused on trophy and Class A office product in New York, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C. Prior to that, I worked for a vertically integrated real estate fund operator, as well as Prudential's third-party investment management arm, Prudential Real Estate Investors. After Ashu's portion, I'll be wrapping up the presentation with a recent real estate case study, the St. Regis Aspen Resort, as well as going through a product demo of our platform.
Thank you, Ryan. tZERO is the global leader for enabling continuous private asset liquidity through digital securities. We can digitize private equity and have it trade continuously in a public-like manner on the tZERO SEC FINRA regulated alternative trading system. This presentation is meant to demystify digital securities and how continuous private asset liquidity, whether it's real estate, a private company, or an esoteric asset, can be achieved. And the material has been structured for an audience that is not as familiar with the process. tZERO is comprised of a deep bench of technical and capital markets professionals. The team has been assembled to ensure this innovative technology can be applied in a compliant and practical manner. Currently, there is a significant efficiency delta between private and public markets. 2 times more capital is deployed in the private markets versus the public markets, yet there's 330 times more liquidity in the public markets. Setting aside the recent uptick in SPACs, IPOs are down approximately 50% since 1996. And frankly, many private assets, such as individual buildings, smaller infrastructure assets, etc., are not appropriate candidates to go public. The fastest way to grasp the scope of tZERO's capabilities is through a quick overview of our org structure. tZERO's majority stakeholders are comprised of a publicly traded company and well-respected venture capital firms. This business is really split into 2 parts. On one side, we have tZERO Technology that has proprietary tech to digitize private equity, to enforce regulatory requirements, and offer tailored security transfer restrictions. On the other side, the tZERO broker-dealer component, we own a number of broker-dealers with appropriate licenses to operate and facilitate private secondary trading ecosystem. From left to right, SpeedRoute is a routing and execution business. It routes about 30 billion shares on an annual basis. We acquired that particular asset because of its institutional connectivity with over 150 broker dealers. Aside from actually creating liquidity organically, we're able to actually get these broker dealers to subscribe to our tZERO ATS, which is the next logo to the right of that. The tZERO ATS is an alternative trading system that facilitates the private secondary trading of private assets. Currently, we are the global leader from a standpoint in this ecosystem with 95% of the global liquidity. Additionally, we have the tZERO Markets, the retail broker-dealer, which allows us to onboard investors directly, go through our AML KYC process, and enter our trading ecosystem. And also completely bifurcated from this business, the security business, is the crypto app that has been growing rapidly, where investors are able to trade different cryptos. We are converging these businesses to enable crypto app investors to actually be able to diversify into private securities. So this presents a very exciting opportunity for private assets that are looking to tap into this new capital pool, if you will. tZERO's technology is really separated from the pack. One, given the fact that it's been tested at scale. I mentioned in the previous slide that speed routes about 30 billion shares on an annual basis, but also given the fact that tZERO as a platform has the institutional connectivity that allows us to not have to create liquidity completely organically. There's a number of benefits to actually digitizing your private equity in the form of digital securities. One, naturally, liquidity. Liquidity for your current investors is very attractive, but also the fact that they're able to also increase their positions if they so wish on a frictionless basis. Also, there's customizability. This is not simply you onboarding an asset onto the platform and it being a free-for-all in terms of the trading dynamics. We can also offer tailored liquidity where if you want certain guardrails in place, whether it be only accredited investors can have access to this investment if you're not trying to maximize liquidity of that investment, or if you want no activist investor to be able to accumulate above 10% of your equity float in terms of governance concerns or whatever the case may be, or if you want geographic restrictions. These are all things that tZERO can enforce on a continuous basis. Also, efficiency, whether it's automating your actual compliance process, whether it's being able to ensure that there's no solicitation of investors that are not qualified to actually invest in your particular private asset. All these are enforced, both the compliance perspective as well as any other actual governance perspective, whether it's dividend policy or whatever the case may be. All these can be automated on an ongoing basis when you do trade any private asset on the tZERO ATS, as well as access. This is really a democratization of access to more elusive assets. So you have access to a much broader global investor base, whether it is accredited or retail investors. I touched upon a number of the benefits of digital securities in the previous slide, but there's some clear benefits to a private asset. One, as this ecosystem continues to grow, a lot of private assets are pursuing onboarding onto the tZERO ATS to reduce their cost of capital. Additionally, they have long-term investors that they're looking to give liquidity optionality to, and they don't feel that the asset is appropriate to either go public or they don't want to go public for governance concerns or ongoing cost concerns. And then from an investor perspective, there's some clear advantages. It gives them liquidity optionality and also allows them to accumulate larger positions in that particular asset on a frictionless basis. If they're a minority owner within that particular asset, allows them to actually realize oftentimes an actual real value as opposed to what they invested, as opposed to a discount to NAV. And then in terms of our flexibility from a trading perspective, you can naturally trade broadly if you're looking to have your asset really have maximized the liquidity of that particular asset amongst the whole tZERO investor ecosystem, or if you really want to have a deeper cap table, or you just have a strong preference to only allow the investors on your current equity stack to trade amongst themselves, we can create a sandbox effect where only your current investors see your particular private asset ticker and can trade amongst themselves, and the broader investor community within our platform would not see that particular ticker. Really, we deal with two scenarios here at tZERO. One is the direct trading situation where essentially an asset comes to us and has a fragmented ownership structure, and they're simply looking to give their current owners liquidity optionality. This is a very straightforward process that I'll walk through on the next slide. Then there's the other scenario, option two, where there's more of a book building process. An asset is already intending on doing a private placement, some type of private offering, whether it's a Reg D 506C or Reg A plus, or whatever the case, and they want that portion of equity to trade on the platform, or they simply want to do a capital raise and have their full equity stack trade on the tZERO ATS post a capital raise, which naturally has a longer timeline that's associated with the capital raise, which my colleague will go into a little bit later in this presentation. So as I mentioned, option one, direct trading, is very straightforward. Post business, legal, and reputational due diligence on any particular asset, we'll review that asset and see whether it's a strong candidate to actually onboard onto the tZERO ATS. Oftentimes, these assets have a little bit more fragmented ownership structure. We'll walk through a case study later on in this presentation of this scenario. But post the due diligence, we'll actually digitize the asset, or sometimes referred to as tokenized asset. Naturally, this digitization will reflect the compliance requirements, but at the same time, offer any tailored requests from the issuer themselves regarding transfer restrictions and so forth that I touched upon earlier. And then once it's past any applicable lockup period, if it does apply for that offering, we can onboard it onto our tZERO ATS along with the investors associated with that current cap table so that it could trade broadly on our ecosystem. And then naturally, we offer ongoing support from a life cycle management perspective for both the investors that are trading that particular asset as well as the issuer themselves. This full process takes between 4 to 6 weeks from engagement. So it is a very, very fast process relative to any type of traditional IPO process. With that being said, I'll hand it off to my colleague, Ashu Vats, to walk through the option 2, the digital security offering scenario.
Thanks, Solomon. The key difference in this process versus what Solomon just discussed around direct trading is the actual capital raise. Most of the time commitment for the issuer during this process is related to the capital raising process. This can take anywhere from 2 to 3 months, but the actual digitization of the securities to the time to begin trading is fairly quick and efficient. And we'll go through a real case study, which Ryan Zega will go over, which highlights that. The goal here over the next couple slides is to share the details of this process while also highlighting how easy it is to digitize your asset and trade on our platform. Step 1 is for the issuer to determine what asset they want to digitize. Given the power of this platform and the technology, there is a broad range of assets which can be digitized and traded on tZERO's ATS. For a real estate company, it could be a building. For an asset manager, it could be a fund. And for many corporates, it'll likely be an upcoming capital raise. tZERO will work hand in hand with issuers to help determine which assets have the right profile to trade on our platform. Once an asset has been identified to raise capital for, the issuer moves on to step 2, which is where we highly recommend working with an established placement agent and law firm to help with structuring the offering. tZERO has a great network of partners, and we're happy to facilitate introductions to placement agents and law firms. Having a placement agent managing your capital raise is not a requirement. Management teams can raise capital on their own. During the structuring phase, key decisions are made around what type of capital raise you'll be doing, what are the attributes of your securities, such as if there's going to be a dividend, a revenue share, voting rights, etc. Once these are determined, a marketing strategy will be decided between the issuer and its advisors in terms of which investors could be interested in the offering. So moving on to step 3, which is the capital raise. I won't spend too much time here as your bankers and lawyers will go through the various benefits and considerations of each type of raise. Most of the issuers we're talking to in our pipeline who are raising capital are pursuing a Reg D, Reg S, or Reg A offering, which are exempt securities which do not need to be registered with the SEC. Reg D and S offerings do not necessarily have a limit on how much you can raise, but do have limitations on the number and type of investors you can have, and each have some sort of seasoning period. Reg A offerings do not have a seasoning period. Also, Reg CF, which stands for crowdfunding, can be too small, even though the limit has been increased from $1 million traditionally to $5 million, but some of our issuers do this in conjunction with other offerings. tZERO does not have any specific restrictions on the type of capital raises we see on our platform. Our only requirement is that the capital is raised in line with all rules and regulations. So taking a look at our last 2 steps, in step 4, once the capital raise has been completed and tZERO has finalized its business, legal, and financial due diligence, our technology team will work closely with the issuer in the digitization process. We receive the list of investors who participate in the capital raise, make sure they have their wallets and brokerage accounts set up, and then distribute the digital securities to the respective accounts. Looking at step 5, depending on the seasoning period, as I discussed previously, which again is dictated by securities laws, these are not tZERO requirements, we will issue a press release announcing when trading will begin. We prefer to give the market a 1 to 2 week notice before a security begins trading so investors are aware and can create an account to access the security before trading commences. Once we hit the trading date, We work closely with the issuer to keep them up to date on price activity, liquidity, and just general trading activity. And we make sure to support both the issuer and the investors during their time on our platform. As we think about assets we're looking to bring on our platform, we're open to a broad range of sectors and asset classes. A lot of our focus and demand remains within real estate, funds, private securities for high growth sectors, and a lot of blockchain crypto firms. We're open to smaller assets, more collectibles as well, which is an area that we're currently exploring. As we think about attributes of those specific asset classes, ideal securities on our platform typically have roughly $10 million in float. This is mainly to ensure there's enough supply to maintain a dynamic trading environment. Also, as part of our diligence, we're focused on ensuring these are stable business models that are generating revenues and are built for sustainable performance. Although we aren't really cherry picking assets to list on our platform, given the early stages of this ecosystem, we want to avoid undeveloped business models. If you have questions regarding if your asset may be a good fit for our platform, we're happy to connect later in the presentation to discuss this further. I'm going to hand it over to Ryan Zega, who's going to go over a recent case study.
Ashu, thank you for handing it over. We want to walk through the process and timing of a recent example of a digital security. In August of 2020, we began trading equity interest of the St. Regis Aspen Resort, a 5-star year-round destination hotel prominently located in Aspen, Colorado. The resort features 179 rooms, 4 food and beverage locations, an award-winning spa, and a host of additional amenities. The property was originally constructed as a Ritz-Carlton in 1992 and purchased by Starwood as part of its acquisition of ITT Sheraton in 1998. Then, in 2005, the property underwent a substantial renovation and rebranding under the St. Regis flag. The property itself was split in two, with a portion being the St. Regis Residence Club and the other being the aforementioned St. Regis Aspen Resort. The current sponsor, Elevated Returns, purchased the St. Regis Aspen Resort from Starwood in 2010 for $70 million and entered into a long-term management contract. Elevated Returns is a full-service real estate firm that is focused on value-add opportunities in the United States, Southeast Asia, and Europe. The sponsor has a strong commitment to digitization and has a pipeline of real estate assets in excess of $1 billion targeted for future digital security issuances. Shortly after purchase, Elevated Returns embarked on a comprehensive $50 million capital enhancement project. The sponsor's strong management and targeted improvements resulted in hotel performance dramatically improving. Elevated Returns initially considered taking the St. Regis Aspen Resort public via single property IPO, but ultimately decided against it. The IPO process would have been costly, onerous from a financial reporting standpoint, and it was uncertain whether a single property IPO would garner enough investor interest. Instead, in 2018, Elevated Returns opted to conduct a Regulation D 506C offering for an 18.9% equity interest in the property, which would then be digitized. Through digitization, investors in the Reg D offering would have access to a high level of liquidity that would otherwise not be available given the asset's unsuitability for an IPO. The asset was onboarded post a regulatory lockout period, and investors gained the ability to sell a portion or the entirety of their stake. The offering also received outsized press attention, with retail investors being able to participate in the offering on the secondary market. Traditionally, these retail investors would not be able to participate in an asset of this magnitude. It was not only the LP investors who benefited from this process. Sponsors are able to highly customize the structure of these digital security offerings, offer streamlined distribution and reporting, and maintain control of an asset. It was a relatively quick 6-week process to onboard the asset. In July of 2020, we formally engaged with Elevated Returns to enable the St. Regis Aspen Resort digital security to trade. Over the next few weeks, we digitized the existing capital structure and provided technical support for the investor onboarding. On August 24th of 2020, the asset commenced trading on the tZERO ATS under the ticker symbol ASPD. ASPD did about $200,000 of volume on its first day. Since then, pricing continues to be slightly above its pre-COVID valuation, which was $262 million or $1.46 million a key for the most part. It was a very efficient process that was executed in a streamlined manner and shows how quickly liquidity can be accessed through our platform versus traditional routes. It's also worth noting that the initial partnership press release received over 350 million impressions, which equates to roughly $3.5 million of ad spend. Both Elevated Returns and tZERO received a high number of inquiries regarding the asset. The St. Regis Aspen Resort is an excellent example of a high-profile real estate digital security. We are actively working with a number of other institutional quality sponsors, including several family offices. The St. Regis Aspen Resort served as a great catalyst for our own real estate outreach efforts, and we are working with a wide variety of product types across the risk spectrum and multiple geographies. These sponsors are looking to either take an existing asset, portfolio, fund, and/or private REIT, digitize the equity and enable trading, or raise capital for one of these aforementioned strategies. In regards to product type, we're seeing everything from very core farmland, triple net leased retail, office, and industrial product, to core plus multifamily and office plays, finally to value add and opportunistic development. We are certainly eager to speak to you and your teams regarding potential opportunities to work together. I will now be running through a product demo of our trading menu.
Today, I'm going to demo the tZERO Markets trading interface. Our technology team has created a very user-friendly experience similar to other major brokerages such as Charles Schwab or TD Ameritrade, with the goal of making trades of private market securities as easy as purchasing a share of Tesla or Apple. Although I will not be going through the investor onboarding process, it essentially mimics the same KYC and AML as the aforementioned brokerages and can be completed within a matter of minutes. For most users, the investor verification process too should be quick and seamless upon submission. When you sign into your account, you will be directed to the portfolio page. Here you'll be able to fund your account either through Plaid or Wire and also process transfers. Your available cash balance and current portfolio value is shown here and also up here. As you scroll down the page, your current portfolio will be shown as well as any pending transactions. Going over to the Market tab, you'll see the currently available securities to trade as well as the bid, ask, high, low, and volume figures. As we onboard additional securities and converge our crypto wallet app from a user experience, there will be additional filter and sorting capabilities. For instance, you will be able to filter by real estate and see the applicable real estate tickers. Investors on tZERO Market also have the ability to go through an accreditation process so that any securities that are limited to accredited investors, such as those trading under exemption 4A7, will solely be accessible to accredited investors. By clicking on the ticker symbol, you're brought to its landing page. This page details the current pricing, order book, open orders, historic data, and any other relevant financial documents. I will run through the execution of a sell order. Here you can input the number of shares being sold, the proposed price, as well as the type of execution. As you can see, there are a variety of order options. Now I'll click Review Order. You will be prompted with the order information, including the transaction fee of 1%. And you can then click Submit Order to process the order. Just want to make you aware of one other important portion of this page, and that's the financial documents and disclosure. At a minimum, we require semi-annual and annual disclosures from a sponsor. Many of our real estate sponsors, included Elevated Returns, are opting to provide a slimmed-down version of their normal monthly and/or quarterly reporting. As you can see here, Elevated Returns has opted to provide a 1 to 2 page management update, followed by unaudited financials, as well as any other relevant information. Moving on to the History tab, this details the order history of a particular user, as well as the transfer history from any accounts. Finally, the Profile tab has a number of other important information, including your personal profile information, banking information, as well as any relevant documents to a particular customer. Thank you for taking the time to experience this. I hope you found our platform as intuitive and user-friendly as intended. I will now hand it over to Alex, who will be directing the Q&A session.
Thank you, Ryan, Solomon, and Ashu for providing an overview of tZERO and how the company enables private market liquidity through digital securities. I'd now like to turn it over to the Q&A session of the webinar. We've received a number of questions ahead of the event and during the presentation, and the team is happy to provide additional insight and clarity. I'd like to kick it off with our first question. What is the advantage of digitizing a private asset in trading on tZERO?
So there are a number of clear advantages to digitizing a private asset. One, it introduces a liquidity optionality for traditionally illiquid assets such as real estate, a private company, or any other esoteric asset. Also, issuers can decide if they want to tailor the liquidity, whether it's setting up certain guardrails in terms of the trading dynamics on the back end. Additionally, it introduces a level of efficiency that's currently not present in the private markets, such as a compliance being automated or ensuring that they have automated dividend policies. Also, it just broadens access in terms of global investor access to that particular asset, whether it's a more elusive asset, such as artwork or any other esoteric asset, and allows both accredited and retail investors to have access to that particular investment.
Thanks, Solomon. Branching off that topic, what types of assets are you seeing in your pipeline and what are the requirements?
Ryan, do you want to address that?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Solomon. So we're dealing with about 150 issuers who are both domestic and international in various stages of onboarding onto the ATS. Some of these groups have identified an asset or company that we are currently diligencing, while others are out raising capital. Real estate still remains our dominant asset class with roughly 30% of the overall pipeline. This is closely followed by a variety of funds, some of which are real estate related, and then private companies. These private companies include manufacturing, healthcare, technology, industrials, as well as many others. We're also seeing an increase of microcaps and companies listed on other ATSs, such as the NASDAQ OTC markets, that are dissatisfied with the current level of liquidity and treatment of their shareholders. Essentially, these firms are looking to delist off of their current platform and relist onto the tZERO ATS. Lastly, we're working with a bunch of other groups who are looking to take other asset classes such as artwork, intellectual property, royalty streams, and other strategies and enable secondary liquidity.
Thanks, Ryan. Another question we received is there flexibility regarding transfer agents and other partners in addition to the blockchain protocol that is used?
Asha, do you want to address this?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Solomon. And that's a great question, just given the fact of all the partnerships announcements that we've made over the last several months. I think it's important to kind of provide that clarity. And the whole purpose of that, I'd say, is to give our issuers, some form of flexibility in terms of, what best suits their needs as they think about transfer agents, for example, and protocols. Regarding transfer agents, we've integrated and we work very closely with ComputerShare, which is the largest transfer agent in the world, TokenSoft, which is well known in the digital security space. We are talking to quite a few more around integration and remain very open around growing that ecosystem. From a protocol perspective, we are agnostic. We are built on Ethereum, which is our own coin tZERO ROP sits on, and have integrated with Tezos as well. And again, continue very much focused in identifying what our issuer needs are, what protocols they're focused in working with, and trying to find opportunities to continue to grow that ecosystem as well.
Thanks, Ashu. This user shares or attendee shares, congrats on all of the partnerships you've announced this year. Can you summarize what the benefits of these partnerships are?
Well, appreciate the congratulations. So similar dynamics that NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange has with an investment bank that serves as an on-ramp in an IPO scenario, we have similar relationships with middle market investment banks, issuance portals, cap table management and transfer agents, and other providers or other service providers to private companies that already have the corporate connectivity and where we're a natural adjacency from a trading perspective. By us kind of being this central depository for all these assets to trade on, it really creates this kind of scaling effect with this web-like on-ramps that we've established over the last really year and a half. But this allows us to scale efficiently over the coming future by identifying high quality assets from a lot of our different partners. And these partners are not only broker-dealer partners or consulting, but also technology partners, as Ashu touched upon. We're really agnostic from a blockchain perspective. So even if a asset is digitized or tokenized by a third party, as long as it goes through our tech review, we're happy to onboard high quality assets that are digitized by any of our partners.
Let's talk about competition in the ecosystem. How does tZERO compare to other trading platforms for private securities?
Ashu, would you like to address that?
Yeah, sure. And I think obviously this is a question that's important and comes up quite a bit, just given how fast our ecosystem is growing and some of the legacy players that have operated in the space for a while. I think there are big differences as you kind of look at tZERO versus the landscape. We are the only live private market with continuous trading, right? Kind of replicating what you see in the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ. I think it's really important being able to provide investors and issuers that dynamic trading environment. The accessibility to investor types, right? Retail, accredited, institutional, that's also important. We talk about democratizing access to these private securities. We really mean that through allowing a broad set of investors to participate in the platform. You don't see that in a lot of our peer sets. I think the asset types as well. We have the ability, as we talked about in the presentation, in speaking with private companies, SPVs, funds, real estate. I think that diversity of asset class, low barrier to entry, is another key differentiator. I think one of the big things as well, kind of anchoring back to the democratization and access to private securities, we don't have minimum investments. We are the only trading platform with no investment minimums, which I think is really, really important in making sure that we're able to bring these securities to everyone who's interested in participating in this ecosystem. And then I think, another key point in terms of how the whole trading ecosystem is moving towards is, we're lowest in trading fees as you think about these private security platforms. I think those are kind of the 4 or 5 key points around what differentiates us from the market and why we think we're going to continue to be the leader within the space.
Thanks, Ashu. We received a question asking for some clarity that I think will be beneficial to this group. What does customization of your security actually mean, and how is it different from traditional equity?
So when you think of traditional equity that's traded on a public exchange like NASDAQ or NYSE, really an issuer has very limited control over who actually enters their ownership structure. As opposed to on the tZERO ATS, we offer a high degree of customization where an issuer or a private asset can actually dictate who sees and who can trade their particular security, whether it's geographic restrictions, whether it's limiting to the investor pool to only accredited investors and limiting liquidity to some degree, or whether it's not allowing certain investors to be able to accumulate above 5% or 10% because there's maybe voting rights tied to that particular security. There's really a high degree of tailored liquidity that we could provide. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we can even offer sandbox trading, where if you have a deeper ownership structure, you simply just want your LPs to trade amongst each other, we could easily facilitate that where a broader investor community won't even see your ticker.
Thanks, Solomon. We've received another question related to secondary market liquidity. Do you see enabling secondary market liquidity on the tZERO ATS as an exit solution, similar to how companies currently view an IPO?
That's a really good question, and something that definitely comes up as we have dialogue with a lot of traditional players. It 100% is very similar to an IPO as you think about process and providing a liquid market for investors. You know, an IPO can tend to be, in a lot of instances, a primary capital raise with a small exit opportunity. But what the IPO does is it creates a liquid currency and an opportunity for investors to exit, which on our platform through a digital security offering, even though they are not raising capital directly through us, investors are able to exit, right? And so in both instances, you're creating a market for investors to be able to move their positions out, right? What this also does in both instances is you're creating a venue which can attract also a broad range of investors who want the ability to move in and out of securities. I would say though, as we've highlighted in the presentation, what we like about the digital security and what we think the benefits are, versus pursuing that type of exit through our platform is mainly due to the underlying technology supporting the ecosystem, the security, the flexibility that you have around customizing this asset, as we've highlighted throughout the presentation. In addition, and most importantly, the cost associated of going down this path.
Thanks, Ashu. This attendee notes that they saw the announcement that Exodus intends to trade $75 million on the tZERO platform. Can you provide more details about this news and what it means for the company?
So Exodus is a large crypto wallet provider. They have millions of users. They recently did a $75 million Reg A Plus private offering. They've actually raised it in roughly nine days. They had about 6,800 investors that were involved in that capital raise. And so with the Reg A Plus, there's no lockup period. So they're looking to have that 75 million trade on the tZERO ATS. So they'll be able to give those investors liquidity optionality. But at the same time, those that did not get to participate in that capital raise, whether they're in our investor ecosystem or they're the Exodus community, will be able to also trade in and out of that particular investment as it trades on our platform. We've had a great relationship with the Exodus team and really commend them on their success, their successful record-breaking Reg A Plus that they just conducted.
Thanks, Solomon. We've received a few questions related to trading volumes. Can you add some color to the trading volumes on the tZERO ATS?
So in 2020, our total transactional volume was about $53 million, which was about 10x what we did in 2019. Thus far in 2021, we've done about $30 million in the first quarter. So that averages to $10 million a month. And we anticipate that this volume will increase exponentially as we onboard new issuers, such as Exodus, and also converge our crypto and regulated business into a single user experience as well.
Thanks, Ryan. The last question we've received takes a look at the future of the industry. Where do you anticipate seeing this ecosystem generally in the next 12 to 18 months?
Perfect question to wrap this up. A lot to be said to this question. So similar to electronic trading, which is simply the norm in the public markets, digitizing private equity in the form of digital securities is simply going to become the standard. At the pace the ecosystem is growing, our robust pipeline of quality assets and enthusiasm we're seeing from sophisticated issuers is no longer a question of whether private assets are going to be digitized. It's simply a matter of how quickly this is going to be adopted. I think tZERO is just going to continue to be the global leader as we converge private assets, crypto, and even public assets into one user experience and just to identify innovative applications for this technology going forward.
Thanks, Solomon. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to our team at sales@tzero.com. I want to thank you all for joining us on today's webinar, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.